as I read your speech, I thought it was like the crux of the speech, which is liberalism espouses freedom as the ultimate value, essentially freedom, liberation, autonomy. And you make this point, and it's something with which I've wrestled, and of course, a lot of people have wrestled, which is what about the freedom to commit to unfreedom in some sense? That is to say, the freedom to commit to a commitment device, which means you're not free. So I'll just take a concrete case that we can dig into more. So let's say marriage. So marriage is a commitment device. The easier it is to leave a marriage, the less the commitment device works, you know. But the more the commitment device works, the less freedom you have in some sense. It's kind of a paradox, and it's a difficult thing with which to wrestle. And I've heard Patrick Deneen talk about this. Now, when he talks to conservatives, he's much more eloquent and persuasive, I think. But when he talks to people such as Ezra Klein, he kind of blanks at this, because I know what he wants to say is it should be really, really hard to leave a marriage. I want it to be harder because that would make it a better commitment device. But he kind of doesn't want to say that because he knows what the liberal retort will be, which, you know, is all like, what if you're in a bad marriage? What if it's making you less happy, et cetera, et cetera. So you think right now we're too far on we don't have the freedom to commit to a commitment device. Is that a correct reading of that speech? And could you elaborate on that?
Exactly. I think that's it. And I feel like we don't have enough freedom to commit to the commitment device. We don't have enough availability of potential commitment devices around us. I think, there's also kind of the fewer people are doing something, the fewer people will be able to do it. And these are precious things that people used to do until, 5 minutes ago in historical time. So, even the concept of marriage, the idea that this would be something to aspire to is now a bit out the window. I mean, it's having a resurgence, but at the same time, it's just not fashionable. It's like, it's just a piece of paper. That's kind of what people think about marriage nowadays. So yeah, I think that's one thing. And yeah, I think there's, the idea that you have this kind of inclusion exclusion type dynamic that seems to be at the core of all of this, because if you have institutions that you want to preserve, and they have certain parameters, like, I don't know, a boys club or whatever, the Boy Scouts or things like that, which are traditional and are a certain way for a certain reason, because that fits human nature and fits, I don't know, male development or male interest and things like that. The idea that this is an unfree club, even if it's engaged in, with complete consent from everyone involved, the people who might want to join and are not men, they don't consent. So I think the fact that this principle is at the core of every sort of new rights revolutions. You have this with trans now as well. It's the idea that, okay, not only do you need to include these people, but you need to include them in your mind space, in your worldview. You need to accommodate their perception of themselves in your mind. And if you don't do that, then, I feel like we've really reached a different level of this, but it's a continuation of the same trend. It's you want total inclusivity and total adaptation of the exterior world to the feeling world of the individual, where the feelings are more important than the actual facts on the ground. So, but because the facts on the ground are very contested nowadays, because they're all very subjective. So I think that's kind of what needs to be resisted, and this shift, I feel, has happened because there has not been a core transcendent set of, okay, this is the good life. This is what we believe to be true about the human animal. These are things that are derived maybe from religion, from philosophy, or from science, or a combination of the three. But this is what we believe. And, I think another problem here is that when you have globalization, and just a kind of a global memeplex that everyone kind of believes in, which you can see, like, every person at the top of every society kind of has the same values at the moment. It's very hard to have, like, little experiments, or if you can, places like, I don't know, Orania in South Africa, where they have very, very specific setup. They have freedom of association in a way that's impossible in the West, just because they're literally in the state of war. Um, these are very rare and far between. And I think that maybe this is something that could happen in like 50 or 100 years, where because you need to have different societies who have different 10-point plans, different transcendent visions, that you have kind of a splitting back into something like nation states, which won't necessarily be aligned by ethnicity, but they will be aligned by commitment to whatever transcendent order that they want to commit themselves to.
I wanted to chime in and challenge the way that you framed that, Bo. And Alex, I'm surprised you agreed with his framing. Because Bo said the problem seems to be the freedom to commitment devices, to commit to commitment. So in other words, these so-called Ulysses contracts. But I take it your response really is that actually freedom is overvalued. In other words, some of these commitment devices should probably be imposed, not necessarily as laws, maybe laws, but as visions that the society shares. And if that's the thing, because I take it the problem with liberalism is actually we do have the possibility of using commitment devices, Ulysses contracts for ourselves. The problem is that we can't deal with the infinite number of possibilities to impose on ourselves. So maybe actually what's going on here is we value freedom too much. We should value social order more or something. Am I wrong about that, or what do you think?
May I answer my point really quickly,
Okay.
and then Alex?
Yeah.
So what I meant to say was that if you enter into a marriage, so like you can imagine the extreme of one society in which divorce is literally illegal, any divorce for any reason.
Yeah.
The question would be, should you have the freedom to commit to that commitment, which is essentially a freedom of sacrificing your freedom for the next 50 years? I guess that's what I was getting at. And I think an important part of this, which is what Alex was talking about with the comments here, is if somebody gets divorced next door to me, that actually literally affects my marriage. So the libertarian says, who cares what people do with their lives? But every time somebody breaks the commitment device, the value that we all collectively put on the commitment device actually declines. It besmirches it, as it were. And so this is in my sense, the philosophical problem with libertarianism. And this is where I 100% agree with Alex, although I find her solution not as persuasive perhaps as some. I'm open to arguments, but that's how I read that speech, at least, Alex. Is that getting at what you were attempting to say, or am I reading that correctly?
No, I think you read it really well, and I feel like your framing is one way of looking at it for sure. I think that the one of the bigger problems here is that a lot of this stuff is popular and uncontested because it is more favorable to people who thrive in conditions where they'd like more freedom, they like more degrees of self creation, and these people tend to be high in intelligence, conscientiousness, so-called elite. And the problem, it's kind of an abdication of noblesse oblige onto the whole population, because the more degrees of freedom you have as a member of the elite, and the more you can customize your life in different directions without destroying it. And then you also propagate these memes to kind of the so-called lower orders, people who just cannot control their lives, and would really benefit from having guardrails or a pattern or some form of maybe a little bit of a paternalistic guidance of what to do and what not to do, and to have laws enforced and things like that. Things are become very unpopular. It really is a dereliction of duties that are not recognized as duties anymore. And yeah, I think that's an important thing, besides just the fact that this stuff really has an intrinsic value, like just the idea that you have a high status order that people look up to and that they want to emulate. And now the idea is that no, you need to self-create. Well, what if I've got very low conscientiousness and an IQ of 85? what do I mean, how do I self-create? You know, how's this going to happen?